Welcome to Decision Analyst Insider Series webinar on attribution modeling. My name is Christy Allen and I'm the Marketing Director at Decision Analyst and the moderator today. Before I introduce our presenters, I have a few notes for everyone. In the handout section, there are some relevant white papers and case studies available for everyone to download. Also, please feel free to ask any questions by typing in the chat box. We will attempt to answer as many questions as we can at the end of the presentation. If we don't answer your question during the webinar, someone will respond to your question within a day or two. Today's presenters are John Coleus. He's a Senior Vice President in the Advanced Analytics Group at Decision Analyst, and also the Director of the Business Analytics Program at the University of Dallas. John has over 30 years of experience applying advanced metrics and models using data of many kinds. And Elizabeth Horn is co-presenting. She is a Senior Vice President in the Advanced Analytics Group at Decision Analyst. She has provided expertise in high-end analytics for Decision Analyst for over 20 years. And with that, I will hand the presentation over to John.
Thank you, Christy. So our topic today, as you've seen, is attribution modeling. And attribution modeling can refer to a lot of different things. So to begin with, let's define what we mean. A lot of times people refer to attribution modeling as measuring the incremental additional amount of sales that is attributable to increasing advertising in a certain channel by a certain amount. This is more traditional marketing mix modeling. What we're referring to today in attribution modeling is the idea that in this environment where people shop today, customers visit many different locations, both brick and mortar and online, and while they're driving and listening to the radio, watching TV, there's many different channels that people walk through, so to speak. And the question becomes, how much of a final sale is attributable to the experience that the customer has in each of these points in their journey? So attribution modeling for us is the relative degree to which final sales is attributable to each of these touch points in a typical consumer's journey. And we can envision this journey in this simple diagram as moving just in the digital world to begin with to a website. Someone starts shopping, go to website A. Perhaps 60% of customers start on website A and 40% website B. Or you could interpret it as a 60% probability of going to A and 40% to B. And then the customer or consumer would possibly go from website A to either D or B, 50% in each direction, and so forth. And so the entire journey of the customer towards conversion at the right of this diagram can be mapped out step by step online. And by conversion, we mean, in our case, we're going to be referring to that as making a purchase, actually making a purchase, but it could mean many things. And really this, in today's environment, this extends far beyond just the online environment. And so that people visit a website, they might participate in social media, which of course is online or through apps. And they view emails, they go to search engines, they receive direct mail pieces in the mail for promotions and so forth. They might see a display ad while they're on a website, they're driving, might pass a billboard, go and visit a store and browse a store, or even drive by a store and see the sign for the store, and increases brand awareness. And that's, in a sense, a touch point as well of the brand to the customer. And so all of these things are what people are doing today. And the question becomes, how much credit should each of these steps, like for example, social media, receive for the final purchase? And so that's the subject of our discussion today. To understand a little bit better what kind of data is needed to do attribution modeling, here's a simple example looking only at the online world, where most of the attribution modeling is done today with online-only data. In this case, we have an ID variable and we have a journey variable. So each person takes multiple journeys. And in the first journey, this person is going from one website to another, and it's depicted by the www.glamour.com and then to Amazon.com on that first row. And so, and then we know whether they made a purchase or not at each point in the journey. And it might be on journey 11 in this case, where someone actually makes a purchase at Amazon.com. So this is an example of the kind of data that is needed, and so these become variables that are used in modeling. For example, a nominal variable indicating the website where someone goes, and a number of purchases made is another variable in the model. The order in which things happen is, sites are visited is another variable in the model. So that's the kind of data. What is the industry practice? We went and just found a survey online that depicts what the current state of the industry is. This was a survey of about 350 marketers conducted in 2017. And we see here that 28% of marketers reported that their company did not do any kind of attribution modeling. So there's one piece of information. There's still companies out there not doing it. And of the ones that do it, if you look at the blue bars, there's the type of attribution modeling. It says lead conversion, touch, last touch, first touch. Last touch is often cited as one of the most common attribution methods, and it means that the last place visited right before purchase is what is the place that gets full credit for the purchase itself. And first touch means the first place visited, it gets full credit. And then there's the multi-touch methods, which are the green bars, which indicate that more than the first or the last gets credit for the final sale to some degree. And the multi-touch can be a linear kind of model where you put some credit on the final place visited, and then maybe linearly decreasing credit as you go back to earlier points on the journey, or a multi-touch where there's a weighted approach where you might give more weight to the first and last and less weight in the middle, forming kind of a U shape with the weights that are used across time. And lead conversion is something that many people do. But lead conversion really doesn't get to the final answer of purchase, because leads can be just registering for a website where there may be no purchase done at all. Now, there's a multi-touch custom bar that's 6% here, and this is more the topic of what we're discussing today. It's some more advanced modeling techniques, custom techniques that do attribution modeling. And so we'll get into more detail about that. But another couple of results from this survey suggest that many firms are doing a kind of attribution modeling that is just easy to set up. It's something that they used previously, but doesn't necessarily, in the opinion of the marketers who answered this survey, accurately give credit to different marketing activities. And only in the bar chart, circular bar, stacked bar on the right, the green portion are those marketers who believe their organization is using the right model. So less than a quarter believe they're using the right model. So our topic today is talking about what are some better ways to model attribution. So to motivate this a little bit, doing a little bit of a literature review, this was an article came out of the Journal of Advertising Research, suggested that online searches for the brand increase when more than online advertising takes place. So TV advertising, online advertising, if both are done, then online searches for the brand increase. And direct searches for the brand increase when overall advertising exposure increases. So this suggests that, at least in the advertising area, that advertising in multiple stages of the customer journey would contribute to additional brand awareness, which ultimately would lead to purchase. But it's not just advertising; it's promotions and other things that are done at the different points in the journey that are important and could create greater attribution for that journey point in the final sale. We're going to talk today about three different kinds of attribution modeling approaches: the Markov model, the hidden Markov model, and the survival model. We'll talk about each of these in turn. To start off with, let's define what we mean by a Markov chain. It's a process which maps the movement from one state to another. And the diagram here on the right demonstrates this kind of a thing where a consumer is moving from these circles which represent different locations in the journey. Think about them concretely perhaps as websites. And there's a probability that someone moves from one place to the other, one website to the other in this journey. And the probabilities as one goes through the journey of being on any particular website change. And this is a random surfer model where the probability people there's certain connections between websites and randomly people jump from one website to another, but it's one process by which attribution could be modeled, but just to demonstrate what a Markov chain is. So the key points are: there's a state space, the set of all states in which one could potentially exist. Those states could be understood in the online realm as websites, these circles on the diagram. Then there's a transition operator, which represents what is the probability of moving from one state to another. So what is the probability of moving from one website to another? And then there's the starting point, which we saw when this diagram began. All of the probabilities or percentages across the 7 circles in the diagram were all equal. So that was the start of the process. Just assume an equal probability of being in each website or each state, not having further information. That's just an example to motivate the concept. And going back to our simplified diagram we presented earlier, the probabilities, the initial states, 60 and 40%, are part of the Markov model. Then the arrow probabilities, like the 50% on moving from website A to website D, are called transition probabilities. And the point of Markov modeling is to come up with these percentages. The initial state probabilities, the 60 and 40%, and the transition probabilities, the probabilities of moving from one website to another in this example. And then, of course, we need to know whether someone actually buys or not, which is the conversion. So how do we then measure in a Markov model what the attribution is for each website? How much credit does each website get for the final conversion? And the removal effect approach is the most common method used in a simple Markov model. The idea is if you were to remove website A, as in this diagram, then and calculate what impact would that have on conversion. It's eliminating a potential pathway that a consumer makes from the start of the journey, the purchase journey, to the final purchase, the conversion. And if one were to remove it, one can actually use kind of a chain rule of initial state probabilities, the probabilities on the websites, and multiplied by the transition probabilities in each step in the journey to get to the probability of conversion. And according to this diagram, the probability of conversion by doing that, 2 different possible pathways of getting to conversion in this simple diagram, is 35%. But if you were to remove website A, that removes one of the pathways to conversion, and the probability of conversion drops to 20%. So the difference, the removal effect, is 15%, 35% minus 20%, and that represents how much website A should get, how much credit that should get for conversion. And each website would have a removal effect or an attribution effect that could be measured. And so that's the idea of using the removal effect approach to measure attribution in a simple Markov model. The second type of model is called a hidden Markov model. And in this kind of model, we're really looking for patterns in the data, and from those patterns making inferences about what is the state of the consumer at each point during a journey. And in this example, we have 2 different states, the investigating state and the ready to purchase state. So as someone goes through the journey, in the beginning, the person is in the investigating state. and then eventually gets to the ready to purchase state. And so the idea in the Markov model is it discovers hidden patterns of the data, and it quantifies the probabilities of these hidden states. These are hidden because we don't observe them. It's the attitude or condition or mindset of the customer as the customer progresses through a purchase journey. And these hidden states in the hidden Markov model actually are what are predicting probability of purchase. So if one is in an investigating state, one is less likely to purchase. If one is in a ready-to-purchase state, they're more likely to purchase. So the purchase is explained by the readiness of the consumer to purchase in this hidden Markov model. So here's an example of taking three variables, and there's a lot of possible variables one could use to in a Markov model to predict these hidden states. And here's an example of using the number of previous website visited, the number of websites that will be visited, and the number of journey clicks. Now, in actual fact, these are all measured in the past. We know the number of websites that were visited, previously visited. We know the number of websites that were visited in total in an entire journey, and we know the total number of clicks that were made. And so in this first row, so to speak, of this table, the blue section, if the person has has visited no websites before coming to a certain website, and they have an intention of just going straight to purchase, we don't know that. It's a hidden thing, but these variables are predicting this hidden thing. So if the number of websites that was visited is 1, then we can assume that person, and they purchased, we can assume that person was ready to purchase, and they were in that ready to purchase state when they arrived at that website. And that's this first row being depicted here. And so the transition probabilities are the 4 probabilities, 0%, 0%, 100%, 100% on the top right table. And they represent the probability of staying in an investigating state or transitioning to a ready to purchase state. So this person is ready to purchase. Their probability of moving to ready to purchase if they were in an investigating state is 100%. They're just going to go for it. And the probability of staying in a ready to purchase state, given that you're already in a ready to purchase state, is also 100%. This person would purchase immediately. In the second row, we have an example of someone who's taking a longer journey, and they're in the third website in this journey, and the number of websites total is 5. And they make a lot of clicks, 50, during this journey. And in this case, in the middle of the journey, when they have visited 3 websites and they're arriving at website 4, we could say that this person has still a high probability of staying in the investigating state when they hit this website, 98%, and only a small chance of moving to ready to purchase, 2%. But if they're already in the ready-to-purchase state, they have a high probability of staying in the ready-to-purchase state. And so that's how the transition probabilities work in a hidden Markov model. And once we could envision using this hidden Markov model, and this was taken from some actual data, and using hidden Markov model probabilities of hidden states that were estimated from this model. So we take, someone's going from this teen.com website to the Barnes & Noble website and so forth to the third website. Their probability of investigating being in that state is very high, and then it starts dropping, and the probability of being ready to purchase starts growing. And then when they get to the person gets to the fifth website, the Amazon.com, they're ready to purchase, and the probability of being ready to purchase is high at 100%, and the investigating state probability is very low. So that's how the Markov model works as one progresses through the hidden Markov model as one progresses through the journey. Then one can use what's called posterior probabilities, taking the transition probabilities that are estimated from the hidden Markov model and taking the actual purchase history of the consumer, putting them together to infer what the probability of each of the hidden states are. And that's using a posterior probability formula based on the hidden Markov model. And from that, we can measure what is the attribution of each website. Because we know at Amazon.com, that a lot of purchases were made, which it implies that the consumers were at a ready-to-purchase state at a high probability. And then in this diagram, New York nymag.com was second in attribution effect. And it's because the probability of being in a ready-to-purchase state when among the consumers who were at that website were lower than at the Amazon.com website. So that's how a hidden Markov model would be used to measure attribution. The third kind of model that we'll talk about is a survival model. And this kind of model is used heavily in medical research and in other kinds of research that where the life and length of sort of lifespan of a person or a product or something is being measured and modeled. In this case, we can use similar variables to what we use in the hidden Markov model. For example, the number of previous websites visited, the number of journey clicks, to predict the probability of survival. By survival, we mean surviving as a non-purchaser in this case. So a non-purchaser dies when the purchaser purchases. So it's surviving as a non-purchaser, and the opposite of that is being a purchaser. So that's the survival model, and the idea is that we predict this survival curve, and then from the survival curve we can know the average probability of survival. Everything else, sort of for the average consumer at different points and different websites being visited. Many variables can be predicting this. So this curve here, where we're talking about the number of previous websites visited as sort of our measure of time, the duration that someone survives as a non-purchaser, is the probability of surviving is very high initially and then drops rapidly. But that's an average result. So at each website, there's different variables that it can be used to predict how this curve shifts up and down and changes shape. And then the actual probability of survival, the average probability of survival of consumers, which can be predicted for all the consumers when they hit each website, can be averaged over each website, and that becomes the attribution. How probable are people to not purchase or purchase at each particular website? And the probability of purchasing at each website is a measure of attribution in this model. So moving back to, most of this work is being done in the online environment, as we mentioned, with online data, because clickstream data is readily available. But it's also possible to do this kind of modeling with data that is integrated across many different data sources, which one of the definitions of big data is that there's a large variety of data from many different sources. It's not just large quantity of data. Of course, there would be large quantities of data for here, but the variety of the data is what we're referring to as big data here. And so in the actual online, in the actual purchase environment today, people can purchase and visit, and during their customer journey, mobile apps, the websites, they can use a desktop, they can use email, they can use page search, social media, watch TV, over the top. OTT refers to streaming media, and direct mail, outdoor radio. All of these represent sources of data that can be integrated together to build a data set very much like the data set we saw for the online environment. The question becomes, is it worth a return? Is the cost of building this data set worth the return? And so what we would propose is that one can start with the online data and build on top of it step by step and do the attribution modeling along the way to understand how much not offline and versus online data sources can be, how much attribution they get for the final purchase. And in that way, one can determine, is it cost effective to even build this data set? Many people are talking about building it, but this would be a way of determining along the building process how much how much it is worth to keep building on this data set. So one more research journal article we just wanted to bring attention to is a Journal of Marketing article that talked about the impact of opening a new brick and mortar store on sales through other channels, non-brick and mortar channels, internet and catalog in this case. And this is an article that came out a few years back, 2012, but it points out the idea that we could develop some theories behind this. Theories about what that would explain why opening a brick and mortar store, which would have an impact on sales in the internet and catalog channel. And the idea here was that there are substitutive factors and complementary factors. And the substitutive factors in this case that was being investigated in this article was that in the store, people could touch and feel the merchandise, and they could have a positive experience with the salesperson. Of course, it could be negative as well. But if they have a positive one, then that would have a positive impact on online sales. It could, theoretically. And so the question is, empirically, what happens? And this article found that there was a positive impact in the short term of opening a brick and mortar store on internet channel sales. And complementary factors on the bottom row here, are things like someone drives by the store and is reminded about the brand. If they have a positive in-store experience, there could be a halo effect, which could impact increased sales on the internet or the catalog channel. And so these are things that have a long-term impact, and they found in this article that there was a long-term impact. So the point here is that there are relationships between what happens online and offline, which suggests that, and if offline can have an impact on online, it suggests that attribution modeling that combines all the data would also be a good idea, so to speak, in order to understand better what are the relationships and how to organize one's marketing efforts across these many channels. So that's our presentation. I think maybe we have some questions. Let's see what we've got.
Yes, we do. While you were talking, John, we have several questions that came across, and the first one says, it looks like it would be difficult to gather, obtain all the data needed for modeling. Do you have a sense for how much data is enough or sufficient?
Yeah. Well, there's the issue of being representative, of course. So having enough data to be representative of all of the customer journeys is probably the key point. There are a couple of sources of data that can help with gathering it, and there are companies that do track consumers online and gather together the journey data for consumers wherever they go on the web, and that can be used to pick out those portions of their journeys that are relevant to the particular company at hand. There are other data sets. Other companies provide data sets that link together devices. So one's cell phone is linked together with one's cable subscription, one's TV, and is linked together with registering on an app, is linked together with their presence in a store, and the location data from the cell phone from the mobile location apps can be used to actually even reverse geocode and figure out where the person lives as well, so that direct mail can be combined as well. So there are companies that are actually doing this today, which makes it easier for companies. So those are possible data sources, and it is it is easier. It's not easy, but it's easier.
That's the fairly typical state of affairs. So our next question, it's rather interesting. It says, do you think that attribution model outcomes could be used as incentives for an ad or a marketing agency? For example, if the agency meets a certain threshold of attribution for a particular activity, like maybe an online banner ad or campaign, they receive a bonus.
Wow. So I think that it is, just thinking about it from a modeling point of view, it is possible to understand when someone in an online environment clicks on an ad. And in that sense, one could attribute some of the sale to that point in the journey, because it is a touch point of the consumer. And so, yeah, it's possible to come up with a score for an advertisement. But then there's a lot of activities that are done by the manufacturer, the owner of the website, the owner of the store, the in-store things that are going on that are not in the domain of the advertiser, which also affect attribution too. So I think, yes, it could, but the attribution modeling, of course, is much broader than that.
Yeah, so it sounds like it may not be completely fair to the agency.
That's a fair statement.
Yeah, it's a fair statement. Okay. And our final question here is, would you recommend using one of the three methods that you spoke about, or maybe selecting the best one?
Mm-hmm, sure. I think the one that's fastest and easiest to implement would be the first Markov model used with online data, and that is a method that could be implemented more quickly. I'm kind of a fan of the hidden Markov model. It's been used successfully in a lot of domains, not just in this area. It's much broader than what we're talking about with attribution modeling. But having experimented with it, I find that it made, the results were intuitive and made sense to me. And so I would say that first do the Markov model and then maybe the hidden Markov model. That would be my preference.
That would be your preference. Okay. Well, that's all the questions we have currently. So we will hand our presentation back to Christy, our marketing director.
Thank you, John and Beth, and thank you everyone for attending today's Insider Series webinar. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to email John or Beth. That is the last webinar for 2018, and we have not set our schedule yet for 2019. We'll resume our schedule sometime around February, so in the meantime, please go to our website and register for our email newsletter so you can read about our blogs, our education videos, and keep up to date for our webinars for 2019. Thank you again for attending, and have a wonderful rest of the day.